for being here. My name is Shannon Biggs. I'm the co-founder of Movement Rights, an Indigenous and women-led organization working on climate justice and the rights of nature. And I'm also on the executive committee for the Global Alliance for the Rights of Nature. I'm pleased to be here today at the Haw River State Park, North Carolina, to talk about the Yesah Tribunal on the Mountain Valley Pipeline and the rights of rivers taking place here tomorrow, June 1st. This event, which is convened by our partners at Seven Directions of Service, is the 12th local tribunal recognized by the International Rights of Nature Tribunal. It is also the first Indigenous-led tribunal in the world. Yes to that. The Mountain Valley Pipeline is one of the most dangerous fossil fuel projects proposed in the United States, not only because of its massive scope, but it's the undemocratic way in which it was approved. This $6.6 billion pipeline was strongly opposed by communities throughout Appalachia and here in North Carolina, where it threatens to carry 2 billion cubic feet of fracked gas through wetlands, streams, rivers, and communities. In fact, its construction had been successfully defeated through legal channels by the actions of organizations everywhere, until Virginia Senator Joe Manchin, the biggest recipient of fossil fuel money in Congress, slipped its approval into a completely unrelated debt limit bill last year in what has become known as the Dirty Deal. Mm-hmm. I'd like to introduce the convener of the Yesah Tribunal, Dr. Cavalier-Keck, to talk about a little bit more about the Mountain Valley Pipeline and its impacts and why this tribunal is historic and how the rights of nature can play an important role in protecting communities here in North Carolina. Dr. Cavalier-Keck is a member of the Occaneechi Band of the Saponi Nation and the co-founder of the North Carolina-based Seven Directions of Service. Crystal, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. Thank you for being here. Mikudamin Chen Kiyohe, Nahom Pipise, Mima Crystal, Mima Occaneechi Saponi, Watiwa. So I want to say that Seven Directions of Service, we've worked with Representative Pricey Harrison, and we've introduced 2 bills into the North Carolina General Assembly. One is House Bill 795 last year for the rights of the Haw River, and this year House Bill 923, rights of the Dan. So the destruction of nature, like Shannon said, especially the water, the MVP has accumulated over $2.5 million in fines from over 500 water quality violations in Virginia and nearly 50 violations in West Virginia. And corporations, with the government's compliance, foster and enhance these problems in our region. Perpetrators like the Mountain Valley Pipeline and essentially the governments, they make these judicial recommendations about the Earth's protection, and they're just destroying it for our frontline communities. So growing up here in North Carolina with the legacy of eugenics, the erasure of our people, plantation slavery, it still holds sway today. Descendants of torn apart Indigenous communities, former slaves, and descendants of plantation owners with the same last names live on either side of the color line on the same lands where our ancestors had been slaves, indentured servants, and masters. In my community in Alamance County, I was taught that it was taboo to speak about being Indian or the old times, this Jim Crow South slavery, or to voice public information about racial discrimination. And so going back to MVP, when it started to come through our homelands in Alamance County, we had to stand up and fight back. MVP gave permits for the pipeline, stating that the natural gas would be used for strengthening our domestic and natural gas supply. And since gaining their permits, there has been talk of shipping some gas internationally. Also, discussions of MVP being bought out by a third party. The land MVP resides on falls under several jurisdictions and land ownership. Some of the land is already owned by the U.S. government, like the National Forest, and land that is privately owned, but is being bought out by eminent domain or condemnation. MVP impacts water such as sedimentation, trenching waterways, changing the flow of streams, and polluting the water point, So we're here at the Haw River State Park. That is one of the sacred rivers of my tribe that this pipeline will violate. Just a few miles down the road is the Dan River, which is where the pipeline will continue to harm today. We are on the land of the Sara people. Some of the people were absorbed into our communities. And again, this pipeline is built on very sharp terrain. Here starts the base of the mountains, but the MVP is being built on this karst terrain, which means there's sinkholes, caves, and streams underground. So these underground aquifers are being harmed and tainted. And they've had several landslides in the last couple of months, as well as they have burst through the karst. So that means people cannot drink their water anymore. And just trying to bring this rights of nature here to North Carolina is just trying to educate our status quo Indians about how we relate to nature and how we are nature. This is part of us. This is who we are. And so we're trying to help people understand that this water has to be protected at all costs. Since 1607, our people have been just forced, raped, and beat into submission, and we really have to stand up. And I'm so glad that we're having Grandma Casey Camp here to help us lead this way in this Yesah Tribunal. So thanks so much, Shannon.
Thank you, Crystal. Rights of Nature is the fastest growing environmental movement globally in history. It is law in 30 countries across the world, recognizing that ecosystems have a right to thrive and carry on their natural processes, which seems like common sense because it is, and that serves to keep the system of life functioning, including protecting the survival of human beings. Along with us today is Casey Camp Horinek of the Ponca Nation of Oklahoma. Casey serves as the Ponca Environmental Ambassador and the drumkeeper for the Ponca Patata Women's Scout Dance Society. Casey also led her tribe to become the first in the United States to recognize rights of nature and rights of rivers into tribal law here in the United States. Casey serves as the president of the tribunal, the Yesah Tribunal, for this weekend, and we're very honored to have her here. Casey, could you please tell us more about the rights of nature and the vital role, leadership role that Indigenous people play in the movement for the rights of nature?
Thank you. I'll do my best, and thank you. Thank you all for having me. I want to always thank the sacred water for the leadership that she offers, and ask for her guidance. Thank you, my relative, for all that you do for all of us, and we ask for your help and your guidance on this sacred day. It's interesting to hear when someone says, Casey led the tribe, and in reality, it's the water, it's the earth, it's the relatives in whatever forms they might take that are part of the sacred system of life, that are part of what non-Indigenous people call nature, call resources, instead of sources of life. And it's an honor to be in this territory and to be able to come to the territory of my children's ancestors as well. My companion went to the spirit world in February, and he was part Catawba. He had planned on being here on this day. So it makes it even more important and more sacred to come here and share with his ancestors and with the ancestors of my children and with the voices of the ancestors of the waters and the voices of the ancestors of the air and the voices of the ancestors that have gone back to the earth to talk about what is rights of nature in context with the Haw River. We went down this morning and we visited the waters with Jason. We walked on the earth here. We sat on the rocks. We looked at the trees and found the guidance to come in here today to share this moment across all of humanity, because we speak with human voice, but with the knowledge of the original instructions that were given to us that created these very bodies that we wear over our spirits. That the cellular knowledge and the blood memory of Crystal's people have led her to this particular time of crisis of the human species in its efforts to either self-destruct or to do as the Indigenous leadership encourages and enables, to set a path forward for the 7 generations to come, the 7 generations that are the directions that you are in service of, that your very organization talks about. And this tribunal, this first Indigenous tribunal, is going to set a pattern that will be viable in those other webs of life that they call the internet, you know, and the ways that are shared in today's world that are vital to be able to get all of the information out that we have. It's so funny, Tiana was asking me, why do I have this here, up here? It's because it says obey. And I say disobey.
That's right.
Disobey today the voices of those that call themselves leaderships, the Trumps of the world that are convicted of 34 felonies for the kind of laws that they enact, the kind of laws that allow the extractive industry to take, to steal, to become the mass murderers of history of all time, and to listen and to obey the laws of nature. Those are the laws that are going to allow us to be able to continue as a species. And that's why this tribunal is happening, because those of us who listen to the wind and understand that unless we have the understanding of why the leaves rattle, why the hurricanes are bigger, why the tornadoes are purifying, why the wildfires are going, why the sacred waters need us to say, these fools aren't listening to us, but you Indigenous people still are in your ceremonies. So we're asking you, and we're giving you the information to share with these. We who have silent voices in their ears are saying, you hear us, you hear us, you feel us with your spirit, with your inner voice. Now bring that voice forward in this form that is going to be able to translate into this modern world what is of value. It is the sacred ones with roots in the ground. It is the sacred one that flows. It is the sacred one that blows. It is the Father, Son. It is our Mother, the Earth, who nurtures us. It is the fires of the Greenland volcanoes and the ones in Hawaii that burn in us as human beings, as a species that has to come forward. So yes, those are what led us to recognize, not give rights of nature, but to recognize the rights of nature, which is part of why the Indigenous Council is formed with the Global Alliance of the Rights of Nature, so that we can bring voice to the United Nations, so that we can demand that the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People with free, prior, and informed consent be brought to you. The true leadership. We have elected leadership. We have state governments. We have federal governments. We have the UN. But the true leadership comes from the Mother Earth and all the natural beings. And the true leadership will be enacted through the humans like us, taking into our tribal sovereignties. What does it mean to recognize the rights of nature, to stop ConocoPhillips 66 from the murdering, the environmental genocide of the Pongo? What does it take for Mountain Valley Pipeline to be stopped in this territory to take care of the sacred waters, to engender all life, and to honor the generations to come. It takes us to act as that voice. It takes you and I. It takes all of us that are looking at this tribunal to say now is the time, because we have hit that precipice where we go this way or we rise up. Sean.
Thank you both. And thank you to the Yesah Tribunal judges and witnesses that are already here, including the Earth Prosecutor, Pam Martin, and Secretariat of the International Tribunal on the Rights of Nature, Natalia Green from Ecuador. They're here to answer any questions for the press about the process and legality and any other aspects of the tribunal that you may have, which we'll do in just a few minutes. As we've heard, rights of nature is critical at this time in human history and desperately needed here in the United States. And it's important that we're here in North Carolina looking at the rights of nature at this ethical tribunal as a real and viable solution. This is not just a nice idea. This is about coming together to urge North Carolina and North American lawmakers and communities to follow in the footsteps of democratic countries around the world. We here in the US should be emboldened to consider rights of nature as not a radical solution, but as a common sense necessity for our future and well-being. As our speakers have noted, tomorrow's tribunal is historic, and it will be broadcast in English and in Spanish, available through the social media accounts of 7 Directions of Service, Movement Rights, the Global Alliance for the Rights of Nature, and the International Tribunal on the Rights of Nature, starting at 9 a.m. Eastern Time. We hope everyone will join us, and we thank you for joining us here today. At this time, I'd like to, as we close, I'd like to ask all of the judges, witnesses, experts, and the prosecutor to join us at the podium for a photo. And at that time, certainly welcome any questions for our panelists and any of the other judges and experts. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Come on, Monty.
Come on up.
Oh, we have to stand
Yeah.
up.
Do we have to stand? Actually, no.
Oh, you sit.
That is
Okay.
short.
Natty's short.
That's hilarious. Is that all our judges?
That we have here.
Okay.
Let's just get pictures.
Oh, wait.
Just
Let me,
get pictures.
okay, hold on. Let me just make myself look nice.
Well, I'm smiling anyway.
So look at these cameras.
This is fun.
Sorry.
This is serious.
Okay, one serious photo.
Oh. I was just kidding.
Okay, now fun face.
Okay, Ms. Ramona. Serious. Okay,
Oh, we're
serious.
being serious now.
We're gonna do a serious one. I can't hold a serious face.
Okay.
I can't do that either. It's like, I'm trying.
I'm trying something. I'm trying. It's not working.
Somebody say Trump at me and then.
Disobey.
Disobey. Oh man, I love
Thank
it.
you so much.
Oh, hey there. one. Heather, come on up here.
Miss Milton Lightning, nice try. Heather, come on. Oh, she's so on me.
And could we just ask the back panel to just briefly just introduce your name and what role you're playing at the tribunal?
I'm going to play Gran.
Oh my gosh, I love it.
Your grandparent.
Hello, everybody. My name is Horinek. I'm the secretary of the Violating Tribunal and will be secretary of Shannon Biggs.
We Boston, we start from Boston, morning, we may start from the magic of the national law, and we may serving the role of the judge.
Actually, spell that out. The purple law. And we're proud to be here as a judge.
Yes.
Yes.
Here, and we look forward to seeing you all tomorrow. If you have any questions, we'll be around for the next few minutes.
Yes,
Thank you.
I wish it's really great if it's possible that Jason can give us a little paragraph.
Oh.
Shit in here. And Jason is here.
We do it outside after the press release.
Yeah.
Right in front of the camera.
Wondering if the folks here can speak more to the connection between rights of nature as a legal strategy and the kinship worldview more broadly in thinking of nature as kin.
I think that within the cosmology as well as within the legal structure that we've created, recognizing the immutable rights of nature, the conduct rights of nature, that in itself says what we need to say, that the statute is created to bring those that are doing the harm, in our case, ConocoPhillips 66, to all of the elements that naturally exist within the natural law, the immutable law, that we will recognize that law as the law that supersedes the law that human beings have made, by recognizing that we as humans are part of nature and not separate from nature, because that's the way that we've always had from the original laws that we were governed by before the colonizers came into our territory. And that by doing the same thing with the rights of the rivers, Niska, Nijide, that we recognize that the fracking industry, because we've also done a statute that puts a moratorium on fracking and injection wells. We've also done resolutions around stopping KXL and DAPL and many of the other pipelines that come through there. Because standing within sovereignty as Indigenous people, we technically have the treaty rights with the 5 treaties that the U.S. has abrogated, the federal government has abrogated. We have not abrogated those. Those treaty rights still stand, and they are the supreme law of the land. And those treaty rights guarantee us the right to clean water, to be able to grow our own food that's not genetically modified, to be able to breathe the air, to be able to bring our children to birth, because in many cases we can't do that anymore. So the federal law, the statutes that are made that go through the whole nonsense of the Bureau of Indian Affairs and into the Department of Interior are standing on the natural laws. And in the same parallel universe as they exist, then we're going to enact the protection of all the things that give life and are life.
Yep. No, I think it's great. Western law is very linear in nature. Our laws are very circular, and people just don't get that. And we have to, everything comes full circle. And I'm just trying to educate people in this community, especially our Indigenous people who have forgotten their original instructions. Try to wake up a sleeping giant. That's what I'm trying to do.
You know, as human beings, we could write laws that say night no longer follows day, that spring no longer follows winter, but it won't make it so. Fact of the matter is that the laws of the natural world will continue to operate as they do, whatever words we put on paper. And that's the fact of the matter, and we have to come to realize that balance will always seem to be restored, and whatever we do to the earth, we do to ourselves.
Yes.
Right.
And if we can't figure that out, and we try to write stories out of that, we will find ourselves in a world of trouble, which is where we are.
I would just like to add that law in the United States and elsewhere, I don't think it's mic'd up, but sees nature as property, as human property. And that allows for the kinds of destruction that we see everywhere. And we live on a finite planet, and the rules of property allow for this just endless more destruction. And if we would like to continue to be a part of the system of life, which will go on without us, if it must, but if we would like to continue to stay and to be part of that in an ongoing way, we have to recognize that the natural laws will prevail, and that rights of nature, which is really comes out of and is embedded in the Indigenous cosmology of understanding what our real role as human beings are within the system of life. That's what rights of nature seeks to correct and rebalance. And that is why it is happening all over the world, in countries. Ecuador was the first country to recognize rights of nature in its constitution. New Zealand, India, Costa Rica. I mean, there are there are over 30. I won't list them all. And communities here and tribes especially have a really important leadership role to play in transforming our legal system here. And this tribunal and the Yesah Tribunal is an opportunity to really step into that world and to really look at what that would look like and how it could transform our relationship with the natural world, and also to change how decisions are made about things that threaten the natural world, like the Mountain Valley Pipeline.
Thank you, Shannon.
I would just like to continue what Shannon has been saying and say, Crystal, we are waking up a monster. And it's actually 39 countries.
A giant.
A giant.
A giant,
Giant.
big giant. 39 countries that have rights of nature, and I'm very proud to be here representing the first country in the world to recognize the rights of nature and tell you that 16 years later, after the recognition of the rights of nature in Ecuador, we have been able to have more than 70 cases in favor of nature. We've been able to stop a mining company like Cavalier-Keck with 2 frogs. We have been able to, as a country, decide to permanently leave the oil underground in the most biodiverse place in the world, that is the Yesah National Park. So this is something that is happening. It's happening everywhere in the world, and I'm really, really thrilled to be here, seeing this development happening here. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you for coming.
Yes. Hold on one second.
So I'll just talk locally. I'll let Shannon talk about other states. But what actually we did was Casey, Jason, and we actually went to the General Assembly and we met with Representative Ashton Clemens, because I went to school with her, and I was telling her about this bill, and she said, "Wait, you have to talk to the environmental person." And so we went in there and we told Pricey what we were doing. And at first she didn't quite understand. She thought it was similar to this bill that's already in the North Carolina Constitution that talks about going to a state park, and state parks have rights. But I was like, that's not what I mean. I mean, we need a bill about this river, because the river is really sick. It's got Gen X, PFAS, and there was this pipeline that was trying to harm it. And I really had to explain to her what the rights of nature was. And Casey really did a good job of following back up and forth. And I was like, if you just have a little faith and just go with us on this, I'm telling you, it's a good thing. And I said, you just kind of have to feel it, right? Like, I just can't explain it to you. It's just who we are. And I said, you just have to trust me. And, I had talked to other General Assembly, like representatives in the Senate, and they were like, oh, you need this progressive lawyer and you need somebody to think out the box. And I was like, no, I just really need you to listen to me. Like, I really don't need anything else. I just need you to listen to me. Just be quiet and just listen. And we didn't quite get him, but Pricey surprised me. She was like, I'm gonna just go with it. I'm gonna go with this faith. And she's been really a supporter and just an ally. And she just took the bill that we had already kind of written, and she sent it to like the legislative, or well, it's like the bill person. And I don't know what you call them. It's like some people that get the bills ready. And they put it in their language, and then they kind of went back and forth. And I had to go back to this attorney who helped write the bill to be like, can you explain them to them in this legalese? Because like, that's your people. So could you help them understand? And so they had this conversation of going back and forth, and they were like, okay, we're just going to write it this way. And then she came to me, and I was like thinking, I had told Casey, my Casey.
Can you give her last name so
yeah.
we can differentiate?
Casey with the K, Casey Kinsella. That I just thought we was going to have to do our education phase of this. And Pricey wrote me the night before she introduced it and said, hey, I'm introducing your bill. And I'm like, what? Oh my God. And she introduced our bill. And I mean, it got the footing that we needed. And so now we're doing the groundwork. So this is the educational phase to try to bring it to the state of how we got this bill. And then Pricey just last month introduced the rights of the Dan River, which is now being affected by the MVP pipeline. Yes, she did it on my behalf, and it was very similar to the Haw River. And we actually got to include language in that bill that talked about the land that they were on, because that is the land of the Sahara people. And that was real important, because our General Assembly here, even though we have a Commission of Indian Affairs, they really just don't get it. They don't get that we are part of nature, and that this is how Indigenous people live. Like, people are so busy worrying about money and status and material things that they kind of take these small things for granted. And so when you start to take your water for granted, I mean, you will die. And so it's a work in progress. But I have a really good feeling about it. I did talk to Representative Renee Price last night and was like, I really need your support on this bill. And she was like, as long as Pricey is leading it, because we don't want to take environmental stuff. But she said, I will support you. So we have a strong support, and we are working on bipartisan support. So. What's his name? He's in Alamance County, Ross, Representative Ross. He put in place about the Haw River Trail, and we went to his office, and he was talking about how he grew up on the river and how much he loved it. And I'm like, well, I got something for you since you love this river. So I have an offer you cannot refuse. So we're working on him.
I would just add nationally that there are laws at the community level, at the state level, and at the tribal national level in more than half of the states of the United States. And I think if we're looking at where we are in this journey for the United States in recognizing rights of nature, we're looking, if we can look back at past movements for rights, where whether we're talking about slavery, civil rights, women's rights, that those rights already existed. And that what we're doing is asking the law to catch up to what is real and what is right and what is ethical and what is just. And so we're at that precipice, which is why events like the Yesah Tribunal are so important. Also to say that some of the earliest rights of nature laws were passed in very red states with red leadership, Republican leadership. So this is not just something this is not a right or left issue. Do you like to drink fresh water?
Yes.
That is not, it should not be a right or a left issue. And the reason that places like Ecuador have passed this before the United States is because an important piece to note is that the indigenous population of Ecuador is more than 50%, and they color the every piece of the culture. And in the United States, indigenous people have been silenced, have been quieted, and we are talking about waking a sleeping giant led by the indigenous people of this land who are here, who are ready to lead and ready to wake up the sleeping giant in the United States to recognize the rights of nature.
And they silenced us by killing over 5 million.
Yes.
Yeah, so pardon me? Of course, that's part of the environmental genocide that we're talking about. You're right, they're still killing us, but those days are past, and sovereignty does make a difference here if we exercise it,
Right.
if we demand it, and if we make it be part of everything that we do, including what you're doing in your state legislature, is to say we have this right, it already exists, and that's, yes.
Any last questions?
With the if they're going to be like reparations, are they going to have like fix the messes that they made, like you mentioned the genetics and the I think that's how we build within our own local community.
But yes, they should, and there is a component that is the just transition component that deals with that issue, and it is how you build your own responses and you build your own ways of looking at what are rights of nature, because we're in the same situation within the UN as well. There's a loss and damages fund that needs to be part of that just transition and to be started at the level of what's going on in indigenous territories.
I was was created and principle like. But of course, what we're trying is not only to talk about reparation and restoration, and that's actually embedded in our constitution, the restoration of ecosystems. Because you cannot pay off nature as you pay off community that's environment. You have to restore and restore the nature integrity. So that is what we're aiming for. That's what we're aiming for the restoration.
That's the last.
She has one question.
So for our work with people we were the first in the nation to make key facts, genetics, and research with environmental justice. That's why our this is water. We've been able to compare those applications and provide technical assistance, and we've helped several communities in North Carolina go several directions, and these are the ones that deserve the money that's already been allocated to clean that up. There is a rule now, as of April, where every single water treatment plant has to clean out several emerging contaminants, genetics, and PFAS. So even the water treatment plant here has to, by 2026 to 2030, they have to clean it out. And there's been $1 billion that's to be paid for every one of the 66,000. But if movements like this aren't happening, they won't know that we're watching. They won't know that when November happens, whoever gets reelected in, they may divert that money. We either have to apply by November, or we get ready for the war. Whoever is reelected after November, that may take that money that has been allocated for us. It's already here. So this bill is going to clear with the money that's already sitting there to push this money.
So we're going to take one more question. I also just want to note on that issue, if the press are interested, we also have members of the Mashpee Youth Assembly here who were instrumental in working with their tribe, the Mashpee Wampanoag, to recognize. And part of that work is not just recognizing the right of the herring to live, exist, thrive, and evolve, but recognizing the responsibility of to rebuild and reconnect the herring to restore their vitality back to where it needs to be. And so they are actually working with the state and state agencies to be able to do that. So rights of nature isn't just a great idea, it's an actual workable solution. With that, we'll take one last question.
Short answer, yes.
You can also look at the Universal Declaration on the Rights of Mother Earth, which was presented by Bolivia several years ago through the United Nations. It takes a while for these things to happen, but it is.
And to talk about the growth that's happening there, last year at the UN, the largest contingency was the oil and gas lobbyist, right? The second largest contingency was Indigenous peoples.
Tomorrow, I have a few copies of the 100 United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. We will have it to pass out for people, so people who are not familiar with it will be able to read up on it.
Thank you, everyone.
Lunch.
Lunch.
Will the prayer? Are we making a prayer?
Are you gonna do a prayer? Are you doing the prayer or Monty? Monty, you and Jason? Okay. Oh, thank you so much.